ever wondered how important your senses are? Because I didn't until I had lost them. On December 1st, I had tested positive for COVID-19. I couldn't taste, I couldn't smell, I could hardly breathe. It was just a whole mess. And afterwards, I found senses I realized how important they were, and I decided I wanted to learn a little bit more on how they work, or like if there's more than just 5 senses than what we originally thought. So your senses are very critical to living. If you didn't have your senses, you wouldn't know you wouldn't be able to know if there's smoke in your house. You wouldn't be able to smell the smoke. And that was also one of the main concerns of when my family and I had COVID. If the house had caught on fire, we wouldn't know because we wouldn't be able to smell the smoke. You also wouldn't know how something fragile like a Lay's potato chip is, because you wouldn't be able to feel how fragile it is, and you'd just crush it. So your senses are very critical to living. Google says that the 5 senses were discovered by a Greek philosopher named Aristotle between 322 BC to 384 BC. And there wasn't really much of a distinct date because it was in the BC. The cells that make up your senses are called sensory cells for the reason that they make up your senses. And the process of what gets your senses to your brain and how that whole signal, that's called sensory transduction. And that process takes 70 milliseconds, which means if you look at this picture right now, and then I quickly flip it to the next picture, and then I flip it to another picture, that's 70 milliseconds in between each picture. So what you're seeing is technically in the past from what I've already done from the next picture. If you've ever wondered why some senses are stronger in some places, that can be because of 2 things. One is that your senses haven't fully developed, or there was an injury where it caused that sense to not fully work anymore. Like, let's say, for example, your hand gets cut off, right? You get in a car accident, your hand gets cut off. Ouch. The energy, you can still feel stuff around where your hand used to be, but there's not as much energy going to it, and so it's being redirected to somewhere else, making that other sense stronger. Another reason is when that sense is used the most. So for example, you can hear, you hear out of your ears, but something that's cool is you can also hear in your hands. It sounds really weird, but if you had plugged your ears and you cover something like a speaker with your hand, the vibrations transfer out and you can actually hear it in your brain. Kind of like those toothbrushes where if you put it up against your teeth and you can hear the music. It's kind of like that. And another thing is, so the reason that happens is your ears, you use them the most, so you hear mostly out of your ears. But if you plug them, you can still hear you can still hear through something else. Another thing is your hands. Right now, if I take my jacket right now and I go like this, I can feel the jacket I can feel it on my arm. But I feel it more in my hand than I do on my arm because your hands are meant for feeling. You use them the most. In the end, everyone should know how their bodies work to an extent. It doesn't mean you have to be a doctor or something, but everyone should know at least something about how their bodies work. And why not pick senses? It's super simple. You use them, you have to use them. But everyone nowadays is learning about their senses, whether it's through COVID, like what happened with me, and losing your senses, or the fact that you're home alone and you're finding new things, you're by yourself, so your senses are a little bit more heightened than normal.